Hey family, welcome back to Black Queen Revenge. We've got a unique story for you today, full of emotion and real-life drama. If you love these stories, please like, comment, subscribe, and share your ideas for future videos. So, let's begin. The gray November sky pressed down on the city, a heavy, slate-colored lid on the world. Jena stood at the window of their too-quiet apartment, her finger tracing the cool glass. The first real snow was a promise in the air, a threat. 5 years. The date, once a beacon of joy, now felt like a countdown to an execution she couldn't name. She was a woman built of elegant contrasts, rich dark skin against the cream walls, natural curls rustled into a loose bun, a silhouette of quiet competence in her boutique designer clothes. At 30, her career was a rising arc. Her firm had just finished a luxury penthouse for a high-profile athlete, and whispers of promotion followed her. But home had become a museum of cooling affection. Her husband, Jabari, was a monument of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with observant dark eyes and a beard so meticulously groomed it looked like a statement. Head of marketing for a major tech firm downtown. They'd been the power couple, laughing over shared workaholic habits. Now his late nights at the office had a different texture. They were frequent, vague, and smelled of a lie. Shaking off the chill, she turned to the kitchen island. The grocery list for their anniversary dinner lay there. A tradition, a candlelit meal at home, planning their Christmas. It had started on their second date, a collision over Christmas lights in a department store. The memory usually warmed her. Today, it felt like watching a movie about someone else's life. Her phone chimed. Denai, her best friend. Don't forget those invoices, and good luck with dinner prep, sis. Jena typed a heart emoji in reply. The silence of the apartment echoed back. 2 hours until dinner. She'd already bought his gift, a first edition book by his favorite Harlem Renaissance author, hidden behind her winter sweaters. She moved to prepare, needing action to silence the unease. Season the chicken, find the tapered candles. The candles, she recalled, were in the garage, packed away last year in a box labeled Holiday Decor. Pulling on a denim jacket, she descended into the cool concrete space. It smelled of motor oil and cold metal, Jabari's domain of pristine order. Tools hung with military precision on pegboards, drawers labeled with a label maker's zeal. The box wasn't on the main shelves. She spotted it up high, behind a stack of summer tires. Grabbing a step stool, she carefully pulled it down, a cloud of gray dust making her sneeze. As she lifted the box, her elbow jarred against a large red metal toolbox on the adjacent shelf. It wobbled with a hollow, weighty sound. A dull thud from within. That was wrong. Jabari never left tools loose. His obsession with order was a family joke. A flicker of curiosity, sharp and insistent, cut through her melancholy. Setting the holiday box down, she reached for the toolbox's latch. The metal was cold under her fingers. The lid lifted on well-oiled hinges. Neat rows of screwdrivers, wrenches, pliers, and nestled in the center, starkly out of place against the utilitarian steel, was a small, midnight blue velvet box. Her breath hitched. The air in the garage grew thin. Her hand, moving as if underwater, reached for it. The box was heavier than it looked, dense with implication. A wild, hopeful thought detonated in her chest. Her anniversary gift. He'd hid it here, in the one place she'd never look. A surprise. The distance, the late nights, maybe it was just stress over this extravagant secret. Guilt for snooping warred with a desperate need for reassurance. She had to know. The lid clicked open with a soft, definitive sound. Inside, cradled on ivory velvet, was a necklace of breathtaking cruelty. White gold, sleek and modern. A teardrop pendant dominated by a deep, starless night blue sapphire, encircled by a halo of smaller, brilliant diamonds that caught the dim garage bulb and fractured it into icy sparks. It was elegant, undeniably expensive, and exactly her taste. A memory surfaced, sharp and clear. Walking past a high-end jeweler months ago, her pausing to admire a similar piece in the window. Jabari had been on his phone, barely glancing. "So you did notice," she whispered, a fragile smile touching her lips. The cold knot in her stomach began tentatively to loosen. He'd remembered. This was his peace offering, his grand gesture. The weight of the box in her palm felt like the weight of her fears lifting. Carefully, reverently, she closed the box and returned it to its precise nest among the tools, wiping her fingerprints from the lid. Let the surprise remain a surprise. She would feign shock, delight. She gathered the candles and fled back upstairs, her heart a frantic, hopeful bird. The atmosphere in the apartment felt different, lighter. She turned on music, her movements fluid as she prepared the herb-roasted chicken, the mac and cheese, opened the good red wine. The table was set, the candles lit, their glow painting warm circles on the linen. She wore the navy dress that would complement the sapphire. At 7 p.m. sharp, the phone rang. "Hey, baby." Jabari's voice was a familiar baritone, edged with a tension she now misread as guilt over the looming surprise. "Look, I'm so sorry. I'm stuck here. Year-end report crisis. The VP wants it by morning." Her heart dipped, but the image of the velvet box cushioned the fall. "It's okay," she said, smoothing the hurt from her voice. "Work is work." "Don't wait up. Go ahead and eat." A pause, too brief. "Sorry about our dinner. We'll celebrate another day." "Of course," she said to the dead air after he hung up. She looked at the perfect table, the flickering candles, the empty chair, the feast for one. With a sigh that seemed to come from her bones, she began clearing it away, packaging the untouched food for her colleagues. The evening stretched before her, long and hollow. She fell asleep on the couch, a book slipping from her fingers, her dreams threaded with the cool blue fire of sapphires. The morning brought a stiff neck and a note on the coffee table in Jabari's sweeping script. "Took a shower and left. Didn't want to wake you. Have a good day." No good morning, no "I love you," just the stark evidence of his passage. She crumpled the paper, her eyes hot. Why have we become such strangers? The thought was a cold serpent slithering into her mind. She choked it down with the memory of the necklace. He's tired, stressed. The gift. Everything will be fine. But the seed of doubt, watered by his continued absence and that sterile note, put down a root, a deep, probing root. That evening, he came home late, moving through the apartment like a ghost. He smelled of the office, yes, but underneath it was something else, a cloying, sweet scent, like expensive vanilla and hookah smoke clinging to his collar. He barely looked at her before heading for the shower, a ritual that now felt less like cleanliness and more like purification. The water ran. Jena stood in the silent living room, a war raging inside her. On the console table, his phone lit up with a notification. A single, stark letter. L. Her intuition, that quiet voice she'd been smothering for weeks, screamed. This was it, the line in the sand. Cross it, and the marriage she knew would be gone. Stay ignorant and live a lie. The water continued its steady hiss. She had minutes. Her feet carried her to the table. Her hand, trembling, picked up the phone. His passcode, his mother's birthday. 4 digits, and the lock screen dissolved. Work emails, texts from friends, and the messaging app. The notification from L. Her thumb hovered, then tapped. The last message, sent 10 minutes ago. Can't wait for tomorrow, baby. I want to feel your hands on me again. Kisses, your Lyric. The room tilted. Lyric, again. She scrolled up, her vision narrowing to the glowing screen. Explicit, passionate exchanges, pet names, plans. Then a message that stopped her heart. Lyric, I can't wait for our 6-month anniversary. Are you really going to give me that sapphire necklace you talked about? Jabari, of course. Already picked out something special. You're going to love it. It'll be our little secret. The air left her lungs in a silent rush. The necklace, Her necklace, the one waiting in the garage. It wasn't a secret for her. It was a secret from her. She kept scrolling, a masochistic need driving her forward. Jabari. For the wife, for our actual anniversary, I'll just grab some perfume set on sale. She won't even notice the difference. Lately, she's lost all interest in herself anyway. The words weren't just betrayal. They were annihilation. They dismantled her piece by piece. The cold, calculated cruelty of it, the budgeting of affection, the disdain wrapped in a plan. The shower shut off. With robotic precision, she closed the app, placed the phone back exactly as it was, and walked to the kitchen. She poured a glass of water, her hands steady now, shock having frozen her nerves. Jabari emerged, a towel around his waist. "What's for dinner?" "I didn't cook," her voice heard herself say, a stranger's, calm and flat. "I thought you ate at work." "Yeah, cafe." He walked past, toward the bedroom. "I'm going to sleep. Early start." The door closed. Jena remained standing, the glass of water in her hand, the words from the screen burning in her mind like acid. Perfume set on sale. Lost all interest. She moved to her laptop, her actions precise, driven by a cold new energy. The company website, marketing department. She scrolled through faces until she found her, Lyric Washington, Senior Client Relations Specialist, a striking woman with light skin, curly highlighted hair, and a confident, knowing smile. Employed for exactly 6 months. The dates aligned perfectly with Jabari's late nights. Their 6-month anniversary was December 17th, 2 days before her own 5th wedding anniversary. The pain was a physical thing, a vice around her ribs, but beneath it, something else was stirring. Not grief, not yet. Something darker, sharper, and infinitely more focused. Her mother's voice from long ago echoed in the silent room. If something feels off, trust your intuition. And baby girl, if a man betrays you once, he will betray you again. Jena closed the laptop. She would not be her mother. She would not scream or beg or wither. The man she loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who traded in secrets and sapphires. A plan began to form in the icy clarity of her rage. Not a noisy plan, a quiet one, a perfect one. She needed the necklace. The next morning, after Jabari left, she returned to the garage. The velvet box was still there, a sleeping serpent in its nest. She took it, not with reverence, but with clinical detachment. She photographed it from every angle, then she called Denis. They met in a quiet corner of a cafe. Denis took one look at Jena's face and her smile died. What happened? "Jabari is cheating on me." The words were stones dropped into still water. Denis listened, her expression shifting from shock to fury as Jena laid it out. The texts, lyric, the necklace. "Let me see it," Denis said, her voice tight. Jena showed her the photos. Denis, who worked at Legacy Jewelers, whistled low. "That's a $15,000 piece, minimum. Custom. Sapphire's that clear? He's not playing around." 15,000, Jena repeated, the number a hammer blow. Their savings, their future. He's giving it to her for their 6-month anniversary. I get a perfume set. Denis' eyes were hard. "What are you going to do?" Jena leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I need a copy, an exact replica. Can your workshop do it?" Denis stared. Then a slow, fierce grin spread across her face. "A switch? Oh, honey, that is diabolical. I love it. Mr. Otis can do it. He's a magician. But we need the original to copy." "I have it. How long?" 2 days, maybe 3. The stones will be cubic zirconia and glass, but no one will know unless they have it appraised." 2 days, Jena said. It was all the time she had. The anniversary was approaching. The next hours were a blur of clandestine activity. She delivered the necklace to Mr. Otis, a gruff, kind-eyed jeweler who took one look at her face and nodded. 2 days, he confirmed. Consider it done. She returned home, the absence of the necklace in the toolbox a ticking clock. Would Jabari check? He might. She had to be normal.
She played the part of the oblivious wife, smiling at his empty promises, swallowing the bile that rose when he touched her. 2 days later, the replica was ready. In the back room of Legacy Jewelers, 2 identical midnight blue boxes sat side by side. Mr. Otis opened them. 2 sapphire necklaces glittered under the lamp. "Which is which?" Jena breathed, unable to tell. Mr. Otis chuckled. "That's the point. Only a professional will spot the difference under a loupe. To the naked eye, perfect." She paid him a fraction of the original's cost and returned home. While Jabari was at work, she slipped into the garage. The toolbox yawned open. She placed the fake necklace inside the velvet box, returned the box to its exact position, and closed the lid. The original she hid in an old costume jewelry box in her closet, a place Jabari would deign to look. That evening, she installed a hidden tracking app on his phone when he handed it to her to charge. A little digital leash. Now she would know where he was. December 17th arrived, cold and bright, the day of his other anniversary. Jena called in sick. She dressed in nondescript clothes, dark coat, large sunglasses, a scarf, and packed a bag. She parked across the street from L'Atelier, the upscale French restaurant where, according to his texts, the celebration would occur. She waited. The winter sun was weak, the air biting. At 6:45 p.m., he appeared, straightening his tie in the restaurant's window reflection. He looked nervous, excited, alive in a way he hadn't been with her in months. Lyric arrived, 20 minutes late, a vision in a tight red dress. She moved with the entitled sway of the victorious. They were seated by the window, a gift to Jena's surveillance. She watched through opera glasses, her heart a cold, still stone in her chest. She saw the champagne, the laughter, the intimate touches. She saw Jabari lean forward, his eyes alight with a stolen passion. And then, after dessert, the moment. He reached into his jacket pocket. The midnight blue box appeared. Lyric's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with theatrical delight. She opened it. Even from across the street, Jena saw the flash of blue and white. Lyric threw her arms around Jabari, knocking over a glass. He helped her fasten the necklace around her slender throat. She preened, touched it constantly, a queen with new crown jewels. Jena took pictures, steady, clear shots. Evidence. She watched them until they left, Jabari kissing Lyric goodbye in the frosty air, a long, lingering kiss that spoke of possession. Then she drove home, the ghost of their laughter echoing in her silent car. 2 days later, it was her own anniversary, 5th. Jabari came home with a bouquet, slightly wilted, and a gaudy bag from a Bath and Body chain. "Happy anniversary, baby." His kiss on her cheek was a dry leaf brushing her skin. She smiled, wide and false. "You too, honey." She gave him the first edition book. His delight seemed genuine, a flicker of the man she'd married. Then he handed her the bag. Inside, as promised in his texts, was a cheap perfume set, 3 bottles with a "buy 2, get 1 free" sticker half scraped off. "The lady said they're the scents of the season," he explained. "How sweet," Jena said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that could poison. "Very practical." They ate. They drank wine. He said, "I love you," before bed. "You too," she whispered to the darkness. The waiting was the hardest part. 6 days. Then the storm broke. He slammed into the house like a hurricane, his face a mask of apoplectic rage. "I've been scammed," he roared, hurling his coat. Jena looked up from her laptop, an image of calm. "What's wrong?" "A fake," he spat, pacing. "A goddamn fake. I spent a fortune." "A fake what?" she asked, tilting her head. He stopped, realizing his slip. "Watches. A batch for resale. Knockoffs." "Since when do you deal in watches?" Her voice was gentle, probing. "A side hustle. Doesn't matter." He was sweating, panic edging his anger. "Pour me a drink." She brought cognac. "To honesty," she proposed, holding his days. He choked on the liquor. "What honesty?" "The kind we don't have in this marriage." She set her glass down with a soft click. She picked up her phone, tapped the screen, and turned it toward him. Like the honesty in these texts with Lyric, or in these photos from La Atelier. The color drained from his face. The image on the screen was crystal clear. Him leaning across the table, placing the sapphire necklace around Lyric's neck. His mouth opened. No sound came out. "I found the necklace, Jabari, the one you hid. At first, I thought it was for me. Then I read your messages." "You went through my phone?" he finally croaked, indignant. "And you cheated on me with a coworker. Which is worse?" He collapsed into a chair, all the fight gone, replaced by a dawning horror. "It's complicated, Jay. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly." She stood, a pillar of cold fury. "You wanted a younger, shinier toy, and you were willing to pay for it with our money, our future, and my dignity." She walked to the closet, retrieved the old jewelry box, and took out the real sapphire necklace. It glinted in the living room light, a blue star of betrayal. Jabari's eyes bulged. He looked from the necklace in her hand to the phantom one he'd given Lyric. You switched it. Smart, right?" Jena allowed a thin, icy smile. "I imagine Lyric was quite upset when her appraiser gave her the news. Glass and cubic zirconia. Quite the metaphor for your relationship, don't you think?" He could only nod, hollowed out. "Oh, and one more thing." She pulled a folder from her bag. "Bank statements. The withdrawal for the purchase. I've sent copies to my lawyer, along with all the evidence of your affair and dissipation of marital assets." "You can't," he began, surging to his feet. "I can, and I have," she cut him off. "I'm not living with a man who buys his mistress a $15,000 necklace while discussing what cheap perfume to buy his wife. I'm not repeating history." The silence that followed was absolute, a vacuum. "Jay, please," he whispered, a broken thing. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. 5 years." "You ended those 5 years when you started texting her," Jena said, gathering her things. She had packed days ago. "The terms are simple. I keep the necklace. We split the assets, 60-40. No alimony. Clean, quiet. Or we go to court and I show the world what kind of man you really are. Think of your reputation. Think of Lyric's face when those photos go public." He stared at the floor, defeated. After a long minute, he nodded. "Fine." "Good." She headed for the door, then turned one last time. "Lyric dumped you over the fake? Said she didn't want a fraud?" He didn't look up. "Yeah." "Tell her the real fraud was the man who promised forever and settled for 6 months." The door clicked shut behind her, a sound as final as a guillotine. The divorce was swift, antiseptic. He didn't fight, cowed by the threat of exposure. She sold her share of the apartment, used the money to seed her dream, JLV Interiors, her own design studio. The grand opening was in spring. She stood in her new space, surrounded by light and potential, wearing a turquoise power suit. The past was a closed book. Then a voice, deep and appreciative, spoke behind her about the blending of historical and modern elements in her showcase project. She turned. Langston Bell, an architect of some renown, with intelligent gray eyes and a calm presence. He spoke of collaboration, of a potential project, and of dinner to discuss it. She hesitated, the ghosts of betrayal whispering caution, but she looked at him, at his direct gaze, his interest in her work, and she felt not the frantic hope before, but a tentative, quiet curiosity. "Why not?" she said, a genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in what felt like forever. Later, after the last guest had left, she went to her new desk. From the drawer, she took the midnight blue box. She opened it. The sapphire necklace lay there, its blue fire undimmed. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal, but of survival, of a strength she never knew she possessed, a costly, beautiful trophy from a war she had won without firing a shot the world could hear. She closed the box. The past was paid for. The future, for the first time in a long time, was entirely, thrillingly her own.
The silence of the studio after the party was a different kind of quiet than the one that had suffocated her apartment. This silence was full, ripe with possibility, vibrating with the echoes of congratulations and the scent of fresh paint and ambition. Jena placed the sapphire necklace back in its drawer, the click of the latch a final period on that sentence of her life. Langston Bell's business card lay beside her keyboard, thick, creamy stock embossed with elegant, minimalist type. Line and form architects. His direct gaze, the lack of pretense, the way he'd spoken of load-bearing walls and aesthetic flow with equal passion, it had been a refreshing shock to her system. A man who saw her mind first. The dinner invitation hung in the air, a question mark she hadn't yet decided how to answer. A week passed in a blur of new client meetings, fabric swatches, and contractor bids. She deliberately let Langston's card sit. She needed to prove something to herself first, that she could stand completely alone, that her foundation was solid concrete, not the shifting sand of anyone else's attention. Denai stopped by the studio after hours, bearing a bottle of champagne and a conspiratorial grin. "So, have you called him?" "I've been busy," Jena said, not looking up from a floor plan. "Busy avoiding," Denai countered, popping the cork with a festive bang, "which is understandable. But honey, that man is fine, successful, and he looked at you like you just invented the color wheel. This isn't a rebound. This is a potential upgrade to first class." Jena finally smiled, accepting a flute. "He's a potential business partner. The city park project is huge." "And dinner with a river view is just due diligence?" Denai winked. "Drink your champagne and call him tomorrow. The park bid is due in 3 weeks. Time isn't your enemy, but procrastination might be." The truth was, Jena was afraid, not of Langston, but of the vulnerability that came with opening a door, even a professional one. Jabari had not just broken her heart, he'd booby-trapped her trust. Every compliment now felt like a potential setup, every kindness a hidden invoice. The following afternoon, staring at the complexities of the park admin building's proposed floor plan, she knew she needed an architect's eye. This was business, solid, legitimate business. She took a deep breath, picked up her phone, and dialed. His voice was just as she remembered, calm, warm, with a rumble of intelligence underneath. "Jena Vance. I was hoping you'd call." "The park project," she said, perhaps too quickly. "The interior flow for public access and staff workspace is a fascinating puzzle. I have some initial thoughts, if you're still interested in collaborating." "I'm very interested in the collaboration and in hearing your thoughts. How about that dinner? Thursday? The River Room. We can talk schematics over scallops." It was a date, disguised, but a date. "Thursday works," she heard herself say. She spent the next 2 days in a flurry of preparation, but not of the typical kind. She didn't buy a new dress. Instead, she refined her pitch, creating mood boards that blended municipal durability with welcoming warmth, sketching sightlines that maximized both efficiency and natural light. Her armor for the evening would be her expertise. The River Room was all understated elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the inky water dotted with city lights, the sound a low, sophisticated hum. Langston was already there, rising as she approached. He wore a simple, well-cut navy suit, no tie. He looked real. "You came," he said, pulling out her chair. Not "you look beautiful," though his appreciative glance said it. The distinction felt profoundly respectful. "I'm very serious about this project," she replied, setting her portfolio case beside her chair. "As am I," he nodded. "But let's order first, sustain the brain for the work ahead." Over wine and an appetizer, they talked shop. Not just the park, but design philosophy, disastrous clients, the tyranny of cheap materials. He listened, truly listened, asking questions that showed he understood the nuance of her ideas. The ghost of Jabari, who'd only ever pretended interest in her work, began to recede into the shadows. As their main courses arrived, the conversation subtly shifted. "I have to admit," Langston said, cutting into his steak, "I did a little homework after we met.
JLV Interiors has an impressive launch trajectory, but your bio is sparse. Prior to launching, you were at boutique firm X for years. A sudden leap to entrepreneurship is always a story. If you don't mind me asking, what was the catalyst? The question hung in the air, the personal intruding on the professional. This was the moment she usually deflected. But the wine, the genuine curiosity in his eyes, the safety she felt in his presence, it disarmed her. She took a sip of water, buying a second. The catalyst was a divorce, a rather definitive one. He didn't offer pity or platitudes. He simply nodded, his gaze steady. Those can be powerful motivators. Sometimes they clear the ground for new foundations. This one did, she said, a thread of steel returning to her voice. It clarified what I would and wouldn't accept, in business and in life. A valuable, if painful, clarity, he said. I went through one myself 5 years ago. It was less about building something new afterward and more about remembering who I was before I started compromising to hold something broken together. Their eyes met. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, a recognition of survived wreckage. It wasn't bonding over trauma, it was acknowledging the strength required to stand on the other side of it. So, Jena said, smoothly shifting the focus back, but with a new ease, about those sightlines in the main lobby. The rest of the dinner was a seamless blend of professional synergy and personal connection. As they shared a dessert, Langston's phone, lying on the table, lit up. A notification preview flashed on the screen. Lyric, we need to talk. Jena's breath froze. The name was a slap. It couldn't be. It was a common enough name, a coincidence. But Langston's reaction was immediate and visceral. A flicker of intense annoyance, then resignation crossed his face. He flipped the phone over, screen down, with a sharp movement. I apologize, he said, his voice tight. A persistent problem. The seed of dread, thought long dead, sprouted thorns in Jena's chest. Lyric. The name escaped her lips before she could stop it, flat and cold. Langston's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise, and something else, alarm. You know her? I know a Lyric, she said carefully, her world beginning its sickening tilt again, who works in client relations for TechVerve. The blood drained from Langston's face. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his beard. Small world, he muttered, but the phrase was heavy with dread. That's her, Lyric Washington. She was a client, a difficult one. A client. The word should have been a relief, but his demeanor was all wrong. This wasn't professional frustration. This was personal. She's difficult in many ways, Jena heard herself say, the words coming from a great distance. She has a particular fondness for other women's husbands.
Langston closed his eyes for a brief second, as if in pain. When he opened them, they were full of a grim honesty. Jena, whatever you think you know about Lyric, and whatever she was to your situation, I need you to understand something. My involvement with her was strictly professional. She hired my firm to design a luxury condo for her 2 years ago. The project was a nightmare. She was demanding, capricious, and, he hesitated, morally flexible. The relationship ended when the project did, with final payment and a mutual agreement to never work together again. But she has a habit of circling back when she wants something. Jena's mind was racing, trying to reconcile his obvious distaste with the flirtatious text. The notification, it didn't look like a client follow-up. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. It's not. About 6 months ago, she started reaching out again. Social calls, ostensibly. Then suggestions. I made it unequivocally clear I was not interested. The messages became less frequent, but they never fully stopped. She seems to view professional connections as a net to be cast, seeing what she can catch. He looked directly at her. I give you my word, there has been nothing between us but a regrettable business contract and her unwelcome persistence since.
He was telling the truth. She could feel it in his weary frustration, in the lack of guile. Lyric was a predator, and her territory wasn't just married men, it was successful men, period. Jabari was just one catch in her net. The realization was both revolting and, perversely, validating. It wasn't about her, it was about Lyric's pathology. "I believe you," Jena said, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Your ex-husband," Langston said softly. "He was one of her catches?" "For a 6-month run, culminating in a sapphire necklace," Jena confirmed, her voice dry. Langston let out a low whistle. "Then he's a bigger fool than I could have imagined, on multiple counts." His gaze was unwavering. "I am sorry you went through that, and I'm sorry her ghost is at this table tonight." He signaled for the check, his earlier ease gone, replaced by a protective intensity. "This wasn't the note I wanted to end the evening on. Can I walk you to your car?" Outside, the winter air was biting. He walked beside her, a solid, quiet presence. At her car, she turned to him. "Thank you for being honest," she said. "It's the only currency I trade in," he replied. "The park project, are you still interested in collaborating? I'd understand if this complication makes you hesitant." Jena looked at him, this man who had faced Lyric's predation and shut it down, who was offering partnership based on skill and respect. The past was trying to sabotage her future yet again. She wouldn't let it. "I'm more interested than ever," she said firmly. "Ghosts don't get to vote on my business decisions." A genuine smile, the first since the phone lit up, touched his lips. "Good. I'll have my assistant send over the formal partnership agreement tomorrow." He waited until she was safely in her car and the engine was running before giving a brief nod and turning to walk toward his own. Jena drove home, her mind churning. The encounter had shaken her, but not in the way she'd feared. It had solidified something. Lyric was a toxin, but not everyone was susceptible. Langston had an immunity she respected. The next morning, as promised, the partnership agreement arrived. It was fair, generous even. She signed it and emailed it back. Minutes later, her personal phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Jena, it's Langston. I hope it's all right I got your number from the agreement. I wanted to say again how much I'm looking forward to working with you, and to ask, as a colleague and a friend, if you'd allow me to take you to dinner again. Somewhere with no history, just the future." She stared at the text. Colleague and a friend. The progression was careful, considered. She typed back, "I'd like that. The future sounds good." The following weeks were a whirlwind of intense, productive work. They met almost daily, often in her studio or his office, heads bent over blueprints, arguing passionately over material choices, laughing when they found perfect solutions. The professional chemistry was electric. The personal undercurrent was a slow, steady warmth. They began having dinners that had nothing to do with work. He told her about his teenage son, Caleb, who lived with his ex-wife in Boston and was obsessed with astrophysics. She told him about her mother, the strength she'd inherited, the design dreams she'd harbored since childhood. They were building a friendship, brick by careful brick. One evening, after a long day finalizing their park bid submission, they were sharing a pizza in her studio. Flour dusted the air, blueprints were spread across every surface. "It's a strong bid," Langston said, leaning back in his chair. "The strongest we've submitted." "We'll know in a week," Jena said, feeling a thrill that was purely professional and something more. "Jena," he said, his tone shifting, "there's something I need to tell you. It's about Lyric." Her guard went up, just a fraction. "What about her?" "She's been calling my office. My assistant has been fielding the calls. She's been inquiring about you, asking how I know you, if we're working together." A cold finger traced Jena's spine. "Why?" "I don't know, but I had my assistant record the last call, legally. Lyric was unusually insistent. She said, and I quote, 'Tell Langston that Jena isn't what she seems. She has a habit of taking things that don't belong to her.'" The words hung in the flour-dusted air, sinister and absurd. Taking things that don't belong to her. The necklace. Lyric knew. She must have had the fake appraised, discovered the switch. She'd connected the dots back to Jena. "She's talking about me," Jena said, her voice quiet. "She's threatening me." Langston's expression was grim. "It sounds like it. I've instructed my office to block all her numbers and refer any further contact to my lawyer. But you should be aware. She's unhinged, Jena, and she's fixated." The safe little world Jena had been building suddenly felt porous. The past wasn't just a ghost, it was a vengeful spirit with a set of keys. "What does she want? The necklace back? I can't have it. It was bought with my money, too." "I don't think it's about the necklace anymore," Langston said slowly. "I think it's about the humiliation. You didn't just discover her affair. You outmaneuvered her. You made her look like a fool wearing glass. A woman like Lyric, her entire power is in her ability to manipulate, to be the prized object. You turned the tables. She won't forgive that." A new kind of fear, colder and sharper than the heartbreak, began to coil in Jena's gut. This wasn't about a cheating husband. This was about a dangerous woman with a bruised ego. "What should I do?" she asked, hating the whisper of vulnerability in her voice. "You do nothing," Langston said firmly. "You live your life. You run your business. You let me handle the professional side. And you get a security system for this studio and your apartment, if you don't already have one. Today." He was right. She spent the next day installing top-of-the-line systems, cameras at every entrance, motion sensors. It felt like surrendering to fear, but Langston framed it as sensible defense. "You're a successful business owner," he said. "This is standard. Don't let her make it about her." But Lyric had a way of making everything about her. 3 days later, Jena arrived at her studio to find the exterior wall defaced. Spray-painted in lurid red letters was a single word: thief. Her blood ran cold. She called the police and Langston simultaneously. The police took a report, dusted for fingerprints, fruitlessly, as the perpetrator had likely worn gloves. They called it vandalism, possibly a disgruntled client. Langston arrived as they were leaving, his face a storm cloud. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into a brief, hard hug. Then he got on the phone with a contractor he knew. Within 2 hours, a crew was pressure washing the wall. By noon, it was as if the word had never been there. But it was there, burned into Jena's mind. "She's escalating," Langston said, standing with her as they watched the water erase the last pink stain. "The police can't do anything without proof it's her." "We'll get proof," he said, his jaw tight. "I've hired a private investigator, a discreet one. He's going to look into her recent activities, see if we can establish a pattern." Jena felt a surge of gratitude, so strong it weakened her knees. "Langston, you don't have to—" "Yes," he interrupted, his gray eyes serious. "I do. She's targeting someone I care about, and she's using my past professional connection to do it. That makes it my fight, too." Someone I care about. The words settled over her, a warm blanket against the chill of fear. The PI, a grizzled man named Frank, worked quickly. A few days later, Langston and Jena met him in a quiet booth at the back of a diner. "Frank Washington," Frank began, sipping black coffee, "lives a flashy life, spends beyond her means. Credit cards maxed. Your ex-husband wasn't your only source of supplemental income. She has a pattern. Targets successful men in positions to give her gifts or advance her career. Relationships last between 3 months and a year. When they end, there is often a nasty, quiet settlement. Threats of exposing something, usually. She's careful, never leaves a clear legal trail." He slid a grainy photograph across the Formica table. It showed Lyric, just the day before, sitting in a car outside Jena's apartment building. She was just sitting there, staring. "She's stalking you," Frank said flatly. "This is prelude. The vandalism was a message. The sitting and watching, that's her enjoying the fear. The next step is a more direct confrontation." "What can we do?" Jena asked, her voice thin. "Restraining order," Frank said. "With this photo and the police report from the vandalism, you have grounds. It's a piece of paper, but it establishes a legal record, and it might scare her off if she thinks you're serious about pressing charges." Jena filed for the order the next day. The process was cold and bureaucratic, but taking action felt good. The temporary order was granted, barring Lyric from coming within 500 feet of Jena, her home, or her studio. They were served to Lyric at her office. The reaction was not what Jena expected. That evening, as Jena was locking up the studio, her phone rang. Private number. Against her better judgment, she answered. "You stupid bitch." Lyric's voice was a venomous purr, stripped of all its social charm. "You think your little paperclip of an order can stop me? You think you can steal from me and just walk away?" "I didn't steal anything from you, Lyric," Jena said, forcing her voice to stay calm. She hit the record button on her phone. "Everything you got from Jabari was stolen from me first." A brittle laugh. "He wasn't a prize worth stealing, honey. He was a means to an end. But that necklace, that was supposed to be mine, a down payment, and you took it. You're just like all the other jealous, dried-up wives, clinging to what you can't keep." "The restraining order is real, Lyric. If you come near me again—" "Or what?" Lyric hissed, her voice dropping to an intimate, terrifying whisper. "You'll call the police? I know where you live, Jena. I know your routine. I know you're playing house with that architect now. Does he know what a conniving little thief you are? Does he know how you manipulate men?" The threat was clear, and it now extended to Langston. The fear turned to a white-hot rage. "Leave him out of this. This is between you and me." "It was," Lyric said, "but you had to go and make it legal. You had to try to win. Nobody wins against me. I'll see you soon." The line deaded. Jena stood in the darkening studio, trembling, not with fear now, but with a fury so pure it was clarifying. Lyric saw her as a victim, a target. She saw her as the wronged wife, hiding behind legal papers. It was time to change the narrative. She called Langston, playing him the recording. His silence on the other end was frightening than any outburst. "I'm coming over," he said, his voice tight. "We're not staying at your place tonight. Pack a bag." "No," Jena said, the decision solidifying as she spoke. "I'm not running. I'm not hiding in a hotel. That's what she wants. She wants me scared and displaced." "Jena, she's unhinged. The recording proves it. We take it to the police, we get the permanent order, we press charges for threats. And then we wait for her to find another way around it?" Jena shook her head, though he couldn't see it. "I have an idea, a way to turn her own game against her." It was a risk, a huge one. It involved using the one thing Lyric wanted, the spotlight, the perception of power. Over the next 2 days, with Langston's reluctant but steadfast help, Jena set her plan in motion. Frank, the PI, provided crucial information. Lyric had a standing weekly appointment at an exclusive members-only spa downtown every Thursday afternoon. She went alone, spent 3 hours being pampered, and always left in a visibly relaxed, unguarded state. Thursday arrived, Jena, dressed in understated but expensive clothes, her sapphire necklace, the real one, hidden under her blouse, waited in the serene, orchid-filled lounge of the spa. She held a magazine, her posture calm. She had booked the time slot after Lyric's, ensuring their paths would cross in the transition. Right on schedule, Lyric emerged from the inner sanctum, her skin glowing, wrapped in a plush white robe. She was smiling, her defenses down. Then she saw Jena. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of startled malice, quickly masked by a sneer. "Well, look what the cat dragged in. Slumming it, are we? I heard your little firm was doing okay. I guess even thieves need facials." Jena didn't stand up. She looked up from her magazine slowly, as if noticing a mildly interesting insect. "Lyric, how predictable to see you here." Her voice was a quiet, carrying murmur in the hushed room. A few other clients glanced over.
Lyric's eyes narrowed. "You have a lot of nerve, after what you did." "What I did?" Jena's laugh was light, brittle. "You mean survive your attempt to destroy my marriage? For a necklace? It's almost pathetic, the cliché of it all." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, does the salon here do anything for the cheap, tinny aura of desperation, or is that a permanent condition?" Lyric flushed, her composure cracking. You think you're so clever. You're nothing. A vindictive, petty woman who can't keep a man. I'm the woman who has the necklace you cried over, Jena said, her voice dropping even lower. She reached up, as if to adjust her collar, and her fingertips brushed the hidden chain. The real one. It's quite heavy. It must have been so embarrassing for you parading around in paste. All that effort, and you ended up with costume jewelry, just like your relationships. The barb hit its mark with surgical precision. Lyric's face contorted. You bitch, she spat, the words too loud for the serene space. Heads turned. And you're a stalker, Jena continued, her voice rising just enough to be clearly heard by everyone. You vandalized my business. You sit outside my home. You make threatening phone calls. I have the restraining order, Lyric. I have the recordings. The police have the reports. The next time you so much as look in my direction, I won't be filing paperwork, I'll be pressing charges. And I'll make sure every society page, every industry blog knows the story of Lyric Washington, the failed mistress who harasses the women she can't replace. Jena stood up, smoothing her trousers. She was taller than Lyric in her flats. She held the other woman's gaze, letting her see the absolute, unshakable resolve there. No fear, just cold, formidable will. The game is over, Jena said, her final words barely a whisper, yet they seemed to echo. You lost. Now get out of my life before I bury you in the one you've built on lies. She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked calmly toward the treatment rooms, leaving Lyric standing alone in the middle of the lounge, exposed, humiliated, and utterly disarmed in front of an audience of her peers. It was a public evisceration, and it worked. There were no more calls, no more painted words. Frank reported that Lyric had suddenly taken a long-desired vacation out of the country. The stalker car never reappeared. The permanent restraining order was granted without contest. A week later, the city announced the winning bid for the park renovation. Line and Form Architects, in collaboration with JLV Interiors, had won. It was a career-making victory. The night of the celebration, Langston took her to a small, quiet restaurant. No river view this time, just a cozy corner table. "What you did at the spa," he said, after they'd toasted their success, "it was the bravest, most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed, and I've faced down corrupt building inspectors. It was necessary," she said. She only understood one language: power. I had to speak it back to her. "You were magnificent," he said, and the awe in his voice was real. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Jena, these last few months, working with you, getting to know you, it's been the best part of my life in years." Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the precipice. "For me too," she admitted. "I don't just want to be your colleague or your friend," he said, his gray eyes serious and warm. "I want to be the man who stands beside you, not because you need protecting, but because you're the most remarkable person I've ever met. Would you let me try to be that?" She looked at their joined hands, at the man who had seen her at her most broken and her most fierce, and never flinched. He hadn't tried to save her, he'd helped her save herself. That was the difference. She turned her hand under his, lacing their fingers together. The feel of it was right, solid, a new foundation. "Yes," she said, a smile blooming on her face, real and unguarded. "I'd like that very much." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, soft and clean, covering the city in a blanket of pure, untrammeled white. A fresh start. Inside, warm in the glow of the candlelight and a new, hard-won love, Jena knew the past was finally, definitively buried. The future, bright and full of unknown blueprints, was hers to design. The snow continued its silent work through the night, painting the city in hushed strokes of white. In the cozy warmth of the restaurant, time seemed to slow, crystallizing around the simple, profound connection of their joined hands. Jena felt the tectonic plates of her life settle into a new, stable configuration. The quakes were over. Langston drove her home, the car a quiet capsule gliding through the pristine streets. At her apartment door, he didn't try to kiss her. He simply lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture of old-world chivalry that felt startlingly modern in its respect. "Thank you," he said, his voice a low rumble in the hallway's quiet, "for trusting me with the bid, the chaos, with this." "Thank you for not treating me like I was made of glass," she replied. He smiled, a flash of white in the dim light. "Glass shatters. You, Jena Vance, are forged steel. Good night." She watched him walk back to the elevator, a solid, steady silhouette until the doors closed. Inside her apartment, the security system chirped its all clear. For the first time since the vandalism, the sound didn't make her tense. It was just a sound. The threat, for now, was neutralized. The following weeks were a new kind of whirlwind. The victory of the park project sent shockwaves through the local design community. JLV Interiors was no longer a promising startup, it was a force. The phone rang incessantly, clients wanting a piece of the magic, journalists requesting interviews, aspiring designers submitting portfolios. Langston was a constant, grounding presence. Their workdays were a thrilling collaboration of minds, their debates over structural integrity versus aesthetic flow now tinged with the secret pleasure of partnership. Evenings were for discovery, trying new restaurants, visiting galleries, or simply cooking together in her loft, talking about everything and nothing. He introduced her to his son, Caleb, via a carefully orchestrated video call. The 15-year-old was a carbon copy of his father, with the same intelligent gray eyes, currently hidden behind thick-rimmed glasses. He spoke with a precocious seriousness about quantum entanglement, but his smile when Langston made a silly joke about Bernoulli's principle and roof drainage was pure, delighted kid. "He likes you," he said afterward, a note of wonder in his voice. "He doesn't do the grunt and one-word answer with people he doesn't like." It was a milestone that felt more significant than any business win. One afternoon, as they were reviewing fabric samples for the park's community center upholstery, Denise burst into the studio, her face alight with a different kind of news.
"You will not believe the tea," she said, collapsing into a chair. "I just heard from my cousin who works in HR at Tech Verve. Lyric is out. Officially. And it's messy." Jena's hand stilled on a swatch of durable wool blend. Langston looked up from his laptop, his expression neutral but attentive. "What happened?" Jena asked, keeping her voice even. Apparently, she'd been leveraging client relationships for personal gain for a while. Expensive gifts, trips, the whole thing. But after the spa incident, word gets around in those circles, trust me. Some of the wives started comparing notes. One of them, the wife of a senior VP, went straight to the CEO with a dossier. They did a quiet internal audit, found discrepancies in expense reports, evidence she was using company contacts for her side hustles. Jena's eyes were wide with vindication. They didn't even fire her for the harassment stuff with you, though I'm sure that didn't help. They got her for fraud. She was escorted out this morning. No severance, nothing. A quiet satisfaction, cool and clear, settled in Jena's chest. It wasn't jubilation. It was the closing of a ledger. Lyric's house of cards, built on manipulation and predation, had finally collapsed under its own rotten weight. Karma, as her mother would say, wasn't just a concept. It was a balance sheet, and the books were now closed. "Good," Langston said simply, returning to his screen. "One less toxin in the ecosystem." The news seemed to lift a final, almost imperceptible shadow. Jena's world grew brighter, sharper. She threw herself into the park project with renewed zeal. It was more than her job. It was a testament to resilience, a physical space she would help create from the ashes of a personal ruin. One evening, about a month later, Langston arrived at her door holding a long, flat cardboard tube, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I have something to show you. A side project." He unrolled the contents on her large drafting table. It wasn't a blueprint for a public building. It was the detailed, beautiful architectural rendering of a modern, cedar-clad house. It was nestled into a wooded plot, with walls of glass facing a serene, private lake. The design was stunning. Clean lines, warm materials, intimate yet expansive. "Langston, it's gorgeous," Jena breathed, her designer's eye immediately captivated by the flow, the integration with the landscape. "Whose is it?" He pointed to a corner of the site plan. The address was familiar. It was the plot of land upstate. Her plot of land. The one she'd taken in the divorce settlement in lieu of Jabari's car. She looked from the plans to him, confusion and a dawning, impossible hope warring within her. "This is my land." "I know," he said softly, leaning against the table. "I mentioned once you dreamed of building a house there someday, just for you. I've been playing with the idea, in my spare time. It's just a concept. The layout is all about light and serenity, a place to recharge, a studio here," he pointed, "with northern exposure, a kitchen here that opens to the trees, a refuge." Tears, unexpected and warm, pricked at the corners of her eyes. He hadn't bought her jewelry or made grand promises. He had listened. He had taken the seed of a dream she'd mentioned in passing and had nurtured it into this breathtaking vision. It was the most thoughtful, profound gift she could imagine. "It's perfect," she whispered, her throat tight. "It's just lines on paper right now," he said, his own voice husky. "But if you like it, maybe it could be our project, the most important one, a home. Not just yours, ours." The word hung between them, immense and fragile. Ours. It wasn't a proposal, not in the traditional sense. It was something deeper, an invitation to co-create a life from the foundation up, to build something permanent together, not on the ruins of other people's mistakes, but on fresh, carefully surveyed ground. She looked at the plans, at the house that represented peace, safety, creativity. Then she looked at the man who had drawn it, who saw her, understood her, and loved her not in spite of her strength, but because of it. She stepped into his arms, the blueprints crinkling softly between them and the table. "Yes," she said against his chest, feeling the steady, sure beat of his heart. "Our most important project." The spring that followed was a season of relentless, joyous creation. The park project broke ground, a cacophony of heavy machinery and hopeful energy. Simultaneously, in the quiet woods upstate, their own private ground was broken. They spent weekends there, camping on the property as the skeletal frame of their house rose against the sky. They argued good-naturedly over the placement of a fireplace, the finish on the cabinetry, the species of tree to plant by the deck. Each decision felt sacred. Jena's business continued to thrive. She hired 2 more designers, delegating more, learning to be a leader, not just a creator. The sapphire necklace remained in her drawer. She took it out occasionally, not with pain, but as a touchstone, a reminder of the woman she'd had to become to survive. She thought of selling it, using the money to fund a scholarship for young female designers. The idea felt right. Transforming an instrument of betrayal into a tool for empowerment. She heard snippets about Jabari through the faint residual echoes of their old shared world. He and Lyric had not reunited after her fall from grace. He'd been passed over for a major promotion at TechVerve, the scandal of his personal life, though contained, having subtly tarnished his golden boy image. He was dating again, someone from a different department. Jena felt nothing. Not anger, not schadenfreude, just a distant, faint pity. He was a chapter she had read, absorbed, and definitively closed. One bright June day, with the frame of their house complete and the park community center's roof being sealed, Langston suggested a picnic on their land. They spread a blanket by the nascent garden plot, the smell of fresh-cut cedar and damp earth surrounding them. "I have something for you," he said, uncharacteristically nervous. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Not velvet, simple, polished walnut. Her breath caught, 1,000 possibilities flashing through her mind. She opened it. Nestled inside wasn't a ring. It was a key. A single, beautifully crafted skeleton key, its bow shaped like a tiny, abstract house. "It's for the front door," he said, his gaze steady on hers, "which will be installed next week. This is yours. The house, it will always be yours, Jena, no matter what. That was the promise of the land. This key is a promise from me that I will spend every day earning my place beside you in the home you built for yourself first." He wasn't asking her to marry him. He was offering her a partnership with an escape clause written in unconditional respect. It was the most romantic thing she had ever witnessed. She took the key, its metal warm from his pocket. It felt solid, real, a tool for unlocking a future, not a lock to bind one.
"I don't need a key to know you've already earned that place," she said, her eyes swimming. "But I'll keep it, and I'll use it to let you in, every single day." He kissed her then, under the dappled sunlight of their own trees, and it tasted of cedar, promise, and a peace so profound it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. The move-in date was set for late autumn. As the leaves began to turn, Jena found herself in her studio late one evening, packing the last of her personal items. The space would remain JLV's headquarters, but her heart, her center of gravity, was shifting north. Her hand drifted to the back of her desk drawer, her fingers finding the familiar velvet box. She pulled it out, opening it. The sapphires glinted, their blue fire now evoking not betrayal, but a fierce, personal victory. It was time. The next day, she met with the dean of the local arts college. She established the Foundation Stones Scholarship, funded by the sale of the necklace. It would be awarded annually to a female student of color pursuing interior design or architecture, a student with talent, drive, and a story of overcoming. The irony was perfect. The stone meant to adorn a mistress would now help build the careers of future women who would need no one's patronage but their own skill. The day she signed the final paperwork, she felt a final, gentle release. The last ghost was laid to rest. The morning of the move dawned crisp and clear. Denai and a few of Jena's team were there, along with Langston's small crew loading the last boxes into a van. Her city loft was empty, echoes of her past life bouncing off the bare walls. It felt not like an ending, but a necessary exhale. She took one last walk through the rooms. The window where she'd stared at the gray November sky, the spot where she'd crumpled Jabari's note, the floor where she'd stood, phone in hand, her world dissolving. This apartment had been a capsule of pain, then a cocoon of healing, then a launch pad. It had served its purpose. She locked the door for the final time and rode the elevator down. Outside, Langston waited by his car, a thermos of coffee in hand. "Ready?" She looked back at the building, then at him, at the open road leading away from the city toward the trees, toward their house, toward their life. "I've been ready," she said, taking the coffee and his hand. "Let's go home." As they drove, the city skyline shrank in the rearview mirror, a landscape of past struggles and triumphs growing smaller, integrated into the tapestry of who she was. Ahead, the highway unwound, leading to a winding road, a gravel driveway, and a cedar-clad house waiting by a lake, full of light, full of peace, full of a future she had designed, fought for, and now, finally, got to live. She squeezed Langston's hand. He smiled, without looking away from the road. No words were needed. The silence between them was no longer the quiet of something missing, but the profound, comfortable quiet of something whole and true and built to last. The crunch of gravel under the tires was a new kind of music, a percussive fanfare announcing their arrival to a kingdom of their own making. Jena leaned her head against the car window, watching as the final bend in the long, tree-lined driveway revealed the house. It wasn't just a building. In the sharp, golden light of the autumn afternoon, it was a sculpture of wood and glass breathing with the forest around it. The cedar siding, already weathering to a soft silver gray at the edges, glowed.
The wall of windows facing the lake mirrored the fiery foliage, making the house look as if it were wearing the season like a crown. The air, crisp and scented with pine and damp earth, filled the car as Langston brought us to a stop. "Welcome home," he said, his voice thick with an emotion that went deeper than pride. For a long moment, they just sat there, taking it in. The journey, the betrayal, the fear, the vindication, the relentless work, all funneled into this serene, solid point. The next hours were a joyful, chaotic symphony of unloading boxes, arguing over where the absurdly heavy vintage drafting table should go. The studio gets the north light, Langston, that's non-negotiable. And discovering that the local pizza place delivered surprisingly well to the middle of nowhere. They ate sitting on the floor of the vast, empty living room, the cardboard box between them, looking out at the lake where the last of the sunset was bleeding into indigo. That night, their first in the new house, they slept on a mattress in the center of the master bedroom, surrounded by towers of unpacked boxes, under a skylight that framed a dizzying sprawl of stars unfamiliar without the city's light pollution. Jena lay awake long after Langston's breathing had deepened into sleep, listening to the utterly new silence. It wasn't the hollow quiet of her old apartment. This was a living silence, punctuated by the creak of settling timber, the distant call of an owl, the soft lap of water against the shore. It was the sound of peace, and it was almost overwhelming. The next few weeks were a process of nesting and discovery. Jena's city-sharp edges began to soften. She traded heels for sturdy boots for walks around the property. Her morning coffee was taken on the deck, watching mist rise off the lake. The studio, with its perfect north light, became her sanctuary. Here, she worked on the park project's finer details, but also began sketching new personal ideas. A chair inspired by the curve of the lakeshore, a textile pattern based on the lichen on the old oak trees. Langston split his time between the city office, overseeing the park construction, and working from home, often in her studio, their two desks facing each other. The collaboration was seamless, a silent dialogue of shared purpose. One afternoon, a sleek, unfamiliar car came up the driveway. Jena watched from the window as a woman in a severe, expensive-looking pantsuit got out. It was Langston's ex-wife, Elise. Her stomach tightened instinctively. The past had a way of showing up uninvited. Langston went out to meet her. Their conversation on the driveway was brief, inaudible from inside, but the body language was clear. Elise's tense, clipped gestures, Langston's calm, firm stance. He came back inside alone, his expression thoughtful. "Everything okay?" Jena asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Caleb," he said, running a hair through his hair. "He got early acceptance to an astrophysics summer program at MIT. It's incredibly competitive. He's over the moon. Elise, she's happy for him, but it's brought up all the old financial logistics. She wanted to discuss the split of costs in person. She also wanted to see the house." "See the house?" Jena repeated, an eyebrow raised. "She said she heard I'd built something interesting and was curious." He gave a wry smile. "I think she was more curious about you. I told her it wasn't a good time."
Jena appreciated the boundary, but the visit left a faint, sour note in the air. The past wasn't just her own. It came in layers, attached to the people she loved. A few days later, while Langston was in the city, Jena drove into the nearest town for groceries. It was a quaint, sleepy place with one main street. As she was loading bags into her car, a voice called her name. "Jena? Jena Vance?" She turned. A woman about her age, with friendly eyes and a toddler on her hip, was waving from the door of the local cafe bookstore. "I'm Mara," the woman said, walking over. "I own the final chapter. I heard the architects moved into the old Henderson plot. I just wanted to say welcome. We don't get many new faces, and certainly not famous ones." "Famous?" Jena laughed, surprised. "The park project in the city? It was in the regional paper. Local firm lands landmark contract. I recognized you from the photo."
Mara shitted the toddler. "This is Leo. Say hi, Leo." The little boy buried his face in his mother's neck. "Anyway, if you ever need a quiet place to work or just a decent latte, we're here. And we have a book club, first Thursday of the month. It's mostly an excuse for wine and gossip, but the books are good too." The simple, open friendliness was a balm. "Thank you, Mara. I might just take you up on that." As she drove home, the encounter warmed her. She was putting down roots, not just in the land, but in a community. It was a gentle, organic process. That sense of belonging was tested a week later. Langston was away on an overnight site visit for the park. A fierce autumn storm rolled in after dark, howling around the house, shaking the windows. The power flickered, then died, plunging the open-plan living space into profound blackness. Jena stood still in the dark, the sudden silence after the wind's roar feeling oppressive. She fumbled for the emergency lantern they kept charged. Its beam was a small, brave pool of light in the vast darkness. The house, so friendly and familiar by day, felt alien, its corners full of shadows that seemed to move. She told herself she was being ridiculous. She was a woman who had faced down a stalker. A power outage was nothing. Then she heard it. Not the wind. A distinct thump from the direction of the deck. Her heart slammed against her ribs. An animal? A branch? She forced herself to walk to the wall of windows, the lantern held high. The beam cut through the rain-streaked glass, illuminating the empty deck, the chairs overturned by the wind. Nothing. She was turning away when a flicker of light, not her own, caught her eye, down by the boat dock, partially obscured by the driving rain. A brief, darting beam. A flashlight. Someone was down there. All the old fear came rushing back, cold and metallic in her mouth. Lyric was gone, disgraced. Was it a vagrant? A random trespasser? In this storm? The rational part of her brain said to call the sheriff. The landline was dead with the power. Her cell phone had one bar flickering in and out. She tried Langston, it went straight to voicemail. The flashlight beam down by the dock swept across the water, then went out. Paralysis gripped her. She was alone in a dark, isolated house with someone outside. The security system, reliant on electricity, was dead. Her old defenses, calling the police, having Langston nearby, were gone. Then a different voice spoke in her head. Not the voice of fear, but the one that had faced Lyric in the spa, the woman who had rebuilt her life from rubble. This is your home. You do not get to be scared in your own home. She moved with a grim purpose. She went to the utility room where Langston kept his tools. Not a gun, she couldn't, but a heavy, solid rubber mallet used for tapping wood into place. Its weight was comforting. Then she went to the main power panel in the garage, and remembering what Langston had shown her, threw the main breaker back on with a loud clunk. Instantly, the house gasped back to life. Lights blazed on, the hum of the refrigerator resumed, and, most importantly, outside, the powerful motion sensor floods mounted on the corners of the house and down by the dock exploded with light, turning the night into stark, white day. The figure down at the dock was caught perfectly in the crossfire, a man in a dark, sodden jacket, frozen like a deer. He wasn't looking at the house. He was fumbling with a small, expensive-looking camera, trying to shield its lens from the rain and the sudden glare. A camera? Jena didn't hesitate. She grabbed the landline phone, which was now live, and dialed 911, her eyes locked on the man through the window. "I need the sheriff at 174 Pine Lake Road. There's an intruder on my property. He's armed with a camera." She gave a quick, precise description. Then she did something else. She picked up her own phone, opened the camera app, and began recording through the window, zooming in on the man's face. He looked young, early 20s, panicked, not a hardened criminal, a kid. The blare of a siren cut through the storm's roar sooner than she expected. A county sheriff's SUV sped down the driveway, lights flashing. The figure down at the dock dropped the camera into the water and tried to run into the woods, but the deputies, with practiced ease, cut him off. Jena, still holding the mallet, went to the front door and opened it as the deputies marched the soaking, shivering young man up to the house. "Ma'am, are you the homeowner, Jena Vance?" "Yes." "We caught him. He's pretty spooked. Says he's a freelance photographer, claims he was hired to get photos of the house and the residents." "Hired by who?" Jenna's voice was ice. The young man, cuffed, looked at the ground. "I don't know a name. It was all through a third-party app. The request was specific. Shots of the architect and his new girlfriend in their lake house fortress. The payout was good. I'm sorry, I didn't think—" The deputy shook his head. "We'll take him in, get the digital trail. Likely a violation of the restraining order if we can trace it back." The pieces clicked into place with a sickening certainty. Lyric, it had to be. Even exiled, disgraced, she was still trying to pollute Jenna's peace, not with direct threats, but with this, violating her privacy, turning her sanctuary into a spectacle. The fortress jab was pure, bitter lyric.
After the police left, taking the photographer with them, Jena stood in the brightly lit living room, the storm still raging outside. The fear was gone, burned away by a cold, simmering anger. She thought of calling Langston, of worrying him, but she stopped. This was her battle. He had given. She didn't sleep. She sat in her studio, the storm easing to a steady rain, and she thought. Lyric was like a virus, adapting. Legal threats hadn't stopped her. Public humiliation had only driven her underground. She was now operating through proxies, using the anonymity of the internet. It was a new, more insidious kind of warfare. When Langston returned the next morning, weary from his trip, she told him everything, her voice flat and factual. His face darkened with a protective fury she'd never seen before. "I'm calling my lawyer. We're getting a cease and desist. We're going after the app company for facilitating harassment." "No," Jena said, cutting him off. She met his eyes, her gaze unwavering. Legal responses are what she expects. They're a game to her, a way to keep connected, to feel she's still in the fight. We have to cut the connection entirely. We have to make her irrelevant. How? By living, Jena said simply, by being so profoundly, visibly happy and successful that her attempts to intrude look like the pathetic, distant buzzing of a gnat. We don't react. We don't mention her name. We increase our security, cybersecurity, better cameras with cloud backup. We make this house not a fortress to be besieged, but a beacon that makes her darkness look even smaller. Langston stared at her, his anger slowly giving way to admiration. "You're not just strong, you're wise." "It's not wisdom," she said, walking to the window where the morning sun was breaking through the clouds over the lake. "It's survival refined. She wants a reaction, we won't give her one. We'll give her silence, and silence is the one thing a creature like her can't survive." They upgraded their security system that week. They also did something else. They hired Mara's husband, a local carpenter, to build a large, beautiful sign at the end of their driveway. It didn't say private property or no trespassing. In elegant, carved letters, it read, "Welcome to Beacon's Rest." It was a declaration. This was not a place to hide. It was a place of light, and they would not live in its shadow. The incident with the photographer was the last gasp. The trail, as the sheriff suspected, led back to a fake account, but the digital crumbs pointed towards Lyric. A strongly worded letter from Langston's lawyer to hers, stating that any further harassment through any channel would result in immediate civil litigation for damages and a criminal complaint, seemed to be the final straw. The silence from Lyric's corner of the world became absolute, not just quiet, but empty, as if she had finally, truly ceased to exist for them. Winter settled over Beacon's Rest, deep and still. The lake froze, a vast pane of milky glass. The park project in the city was under roof, the interior work, Jena's domain, beginning in earnest. One evening, as they sat by the roaring fireplace, Langston put a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper on her lap. "Another key?" she teased. "Open it."
She tore the paper away. It was a framed architectural drawing, but not of a building. It was a detailed, beautifully rendered site plan of their entire property: the house, the studio, the dock, the gardens. And there, sketched along the winding path from the house to the lake, were a series of small, charming structures: a greenhouse, a tiny reading pagoda, a fire pit with semicircular seating. At the bottom, in his precise lettering, it labeled, Phase 2, The Grounds of Beacon's Rest, a collaboration. Tears welled up again. He was always one step ahead, building their future in his mind, then inviting her in to co-create it. "Merry Christmas, Jena," he said softly. It was only December 10th. She looked from the drawing to him, the firelight dancing in his eyes. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty this was her life now. Not a rebound, not a reaction, but a profound, chosen partnership. The past had been a furious, stormy sea. This was the calm, deep water after the hurricane, and it was more beautiful than she could ever have imagined. She didn't say anything. She simply leaned over and kissed him, a kiss that held promises of greenhouses in spring, fire pits under summer stars, and a lifetime of shared blueprints. Outside, the first delicate flakes of a new snow began to fall, silently covering the world in another fresh, clean start. Inside, the fire crackled, and the house, their beacon, stood warm and bright against the coming night.